Hi my friend, in this video we're going to be making house drums inspired by Oden and Fatzo's song, Tell Me What You Want. We're going to find out if we can do this in under 30 minutes using the 80-20 rule of house drum production. And what you're listening to right now is the song we'll be working on. And now what you're looking at is the Ableton project file that we'll be working on. In particular, we're going to focus on this drum group right here. We're going to go in order of how I actually built things out so you can follow along when you're creating your own drum tracks in this style. And in particular, there's some cool stuff with the open hats, this wavy cool effect that they use that I'm pretty excited to show you. So make sure you stick around to the end of the video. We'll be doing a full recap of the 80-20 rule for this one, because all in all, it only took about 30 minutes for me to recreate the drums using the techniques that I'm going to show you in this video. And if we zoom out and have a look at this entire thing, you'll see that it's been completely mixed, mastered, arranged, and it's ready to be used in DJ sets or sent out to labels, and this only took about 5 or 6 hours for me to complete. So if you want to help finishing songs faster too, I've made you a free bundle of templates, samples, and special bonuses that I use to completely finish one song like this every single week. Visit the link that's on screen now or in the description to grab the ultimate song finishing toolkit for free. And if you want to take things to the next level, you can also find a link to this video's project files in the description as well, as long as 20 other project files of Beatport top charts, and new ones are added every single week as well. But with that said, let's jump into this. Alright. So when it comes to the drums for this one, like normal, the main thing I recommend is having the reference track on a track here, turning it off and mapping the solo button to the S key or something like that on your keyboard. This way what you can do is you can flick back and forth what you're working on, which is the drum track right here, and the actual reference track, so this. Now, let's take a quick listen to the drum track of the reference. So I'll jump to the spot in the song right here. Really focus on the drums. And now let's listen to what we have. So pretty similar, pretty close. I think I kind of nailed this one, so I'm excited to just show you it. So let's start off with what I normally start off with is the kick. So I'm just going to grab everything in this drum group here and just turn it off. And we can start by just listening to the kick. So the first thing I like to do is I have this kind of drum template here where it has like a drum rack set up ready to go with the processing I normally do. And then also like the pattern that's most common. So it's like the 4 and the 4 kick pattern. It just takes a lot of steps out of the procedure. So the first thing that I did was I stole the kick from the track. So what I recommend doing is when you have the reference track in, also use one of these arrangement tracks using like empty MIDI clips to kind of map out where the sections of the song are. This way you can quickly be like, okay, the intro has drums and the outro has drums, and you can go to those areas really quickly. So then what I did was I found the intro section here. And right here I found a kick that was more or less by itself. And then I just Command E in 2 spots here to kind of isolate it, and then Command J to consolidate it so that it's its own sample. It's not the entire track. This way, then what you can do is then right click it. You can press show in browser, and it's going to show that kick sample there. Then in Ableton 12, what you can do is press this button right here, and it's going to show a bunch of different kick sounds that are similar to this original one. So then what I did next was I jumped into my kick track here. Let me just zoom out and get in so you can see it nice. And then I just found a bunch using this method to fill up a drum rack with sounds that are similar. This way you can get you're stealing the kick in a sense, but then you're also using it to find samples within your one-shot library that are maybe higher quality than just extracting it from the actual sound. So build up a library of sounds that are similar, like this. And then the other thing that I also like to do is I have this little rack here where I actually dragged the stolen kick and dropped it into this rack. And then I have a couple of quick macros that allowed me to isolate the kick a little bit more. And then what I did is over here on this EQ8, removed some of the lows and a bit of some of the highs. This way I can blend in that stolen kick sound with the rest of my one-shot sound. So let's have a listen to the kick by itself. So this, now I'm going to isolate just the kick I found. And now I'm going to isolate the stolen kick. So if you can hear there, I'm using the one-shot sound from my library to have like the main full body sound. Then I'm also adding in some of the stolen kick to give it that like more mid and high kind of texture and character to blend it in with the open or the one shot sound to get even closer to that original sample sound. So let's have a look at some of the processing after that. But before the processing, actually, one of the main things is just getting the volume of the kick similar to the reference track. Getting your volumes is really going to get you that 80% of the way there when doing all of your drums. So the way I do that is by playing it here, then hitting the S key, and just jumping back and forth like that. Just trying to kind of almost do it in time so you can almost imagine or hear your drum sound in the actual track, and that's going to be kind of the best way there. But the more you practice it, the more you'll get better at it. Then other than that, the only thing that I have some processing, I'm using a drum bus here, had a bit of saturation. This boom I really like, it adds almost like a subby texture to the sound, and then just bringing down the dampening a bit, so it's kind of removing some of the highs. That's really a look at the kick. The next element I added in was the open hat. So usually what I recommend is as you're listening to the reference track, find out what the kind of key elements are. I always find like the kick is usually the first one, and then the second one might be the open hat or the snare. In this example, I found the snare to be the next most integral part of the drums, so that's what I added in next. So let's have a listen to the open hat that I added. Really listen to the open hat. And I'm going to flick to the reference and really focus on the open hat there. So mine might be a little bit louder, but pretty close. First look at the pattern. Like normal with this template that I have it on the offbeat like this so that it's the kind of, it's always going to happen that way. And then if you need to, you can, what I did here is you can press on the piano roll here and it'll grab all of them. And you can press Option and then drag it up if you need to do a layered sound, which is what I ended up doing here. So that's a look at the pattern. Now let's have a look at the sounds. So for the sound, what I did very similar. I didn't do the similar sound feature, but I have in my template a bunch of samples that I use almost, that I went the process of like finding my favorite open hat sounds. So that I'm always almost kind of ready to go with like 4 or 5 open hat sounds instead of having to look through the entire library. And then I just kind of like use this selector, or you can just do it in the actual MIDI clip. So you can like go like this and just flip through while pressing S on your keyboard, trying to find something that sounds similar. And then I ended up with this sound here, and then I ended up layering it as well. Let me see something here. I'm wondering, yeah. So let me just mute this first. So this is the first sound that I found. And then in terms of any processing here, removing, this is the center channel strip that I have. It automatically loads onto any MIDI or audio track. This allows me to mix as I go really quickly using kind of macro knobs instead of loading up the same things every time. It allows me to finish songs a lot faster. It's something I recommend, and you can grab this in the project files as well. So we're just removing a bunch of the lows, and then we're using this transient shaper here, which is the Killer Arts transient shaper. It's free. I've just mapped some of the knobs to macros, so I can just open it and use it quickly without having to actually open up the VST and waste time with the UI or anything. And just brought down the sustain a little bit to tighten up the sound. And that's really it with that. But the next thing that I added in was this additional hat sound. So I'm going to mute it and just show off the hat sound that was added in secondary. So this is a really cool thing that I heard in the drum track here in the reference. There's almost this additional open hi-hat that's moving left and right in the stereo spectrum, and then also kind of like swelling and filtering. Let me play the reference for a bit and see if you can hear it. So focus on the open hat, but notice how it's kind of moving left and right and kind of filtering. Yeah, not sure if you can hear it, but there's definitely some cool little stereo thing happening. And so that was fun to figure out. I don't think I nailed it. They did a really cool job with that. So I basically just have this additional open hat sound. What I did was I threw on this effect rack to use the pan man. So you could also use the auto pan, just so it's moving left and right in the stereo spectrum. And then I use the phaser flanger to kind of give it a little bit of like a warbly modulated sound. And then I use this auto filter here. So basically brought down the filter frequency and then introduced the LFO. at a 3/4 rate so that it's kind of morphing and moving in a cool way, like a cool filtered way. Other than that, the main thing is the volumes. Again, listening back and forth, focusing on that element as much as you can, trying to get the volumes right. So getting the pattern, getting the right sound, and then getting the volumes is really going to be the majority of the work there. And it's going to get you that 80% with 20% of the effort. Next element that I added in was these closed hats. So let's have a look and listen to that. And the reference. Trying to really listen to the closed hat sound. So again, I think mine might be a little bit louder than the reference track, but here's how I went about it. So one of the first things I like to do is in the template, I have a notes here that is playing on the same hits as that open hat, so that the offbeat. And then what I like to do is first, either using that selector to move the notes around or just doing it in the MIDI clip. Finding a closed hat that kind of gels nicely with the open hat, almost sounds like it's the same sound. It's like working together. This way, it's a nice use. It adds a little bit extra body and impact on the open hat, and then also allows you as an arrangement trick to pull out the open hat, and you still have something driving like that for like maybe quieter parts of the song, the intro, the outro, when you're trying to bring down the energy, those kind of things. So once I had that selected, the next was to add the groove. And so basically what I was hearing was that kind of like, and then this is what we ended up with. And then basically to get this, what I did was I just brought down the volume velocities of it quite a bit and then adjusted them a little bit so they're kind of like a little bit more of a humanized feel. In terms of the sound design, I went for a same tactic as I did with the open hat. In my project here, in my template, I have a bunch of closed hat sounds that I really like that I went through the process of refining into this drum rack. This way I can just grab those and use them really quickly without having to go through my entire library again. And then lastly, when I guess before that, then the next thing was volumes, making sure, so first notes, then volumes again, and then and before volumes, the sound selection. Then in terms of any processing here, we're just removing a bit of the lows with this channel strip, and then also introducing a bit of saturation, which kind of fills up the sound a little bit, adds a little bit of grit and texture, and it's just Ableton's saturator. I've just mapped it to this knob here so that I can just do it with one knob instead of having to load it up every time and look at the UI. A lot simpler, allows me to mix as I go and move on quickly, which is the name of the game here. The next element that I thought was really important was this clap sound. So let's go ahead and take a look and listen to that. So in terms of the pattern, it's on the 2 and the 4, 2 and the 4, standard kind of hits for claps and snares. So again, in my template, I have it set up so that these are already there, ready for me to go. I can just adjust the positions of the template here. What I did for this is, one thing I like to do is have like the claps changing from hit to hit. I find it creates kind of a humanized kind of factor to the sound and makes it just a little bit more interesting, especially during kind of loopy house music like this. In terms of the sound design, this one I had to kind of look through my library and find some similar stuff because I wasn't too happy with the original claps that I had set up here. It wasn't kind of that sound that they had. So I had to go through my library and build up a bunch of different hits. This way I was able to audition a bunch while doing the same thing. Flipping back and forth between the reference and what I have, moving the clap hits. So that I'm able to find something that sounds similar. And then once I was able to do that, then it was all about setting up the volumes. And then in terms of any processing, there might be some cool stuff going on here. I'm going to double check each one of the hits. So some of the hits have been transposed, little things like that. In terms of any processing, removing a bunch of the lows, shelving out a bit of the highs. Shelving out the highs can be a nice way to reduce some of that high end in a way that's more transparent, or I guess less obtrusive than a classic like low pass filter. Low pass filter can be very aggressive. Adding a shelf filter like this is a way that you can reduce the highs in a less aggressive way. Then I've been using this plugin quite a bit, the compressor by Phil Spicer. It's free, so definitely check it out. It has this little magic option where you can kind of like select what the input signal is, how much compression you want, and it'll listen to the signal and then compress it. Basically, we want to just have a more consistent dynamics with the claps, as if they're almost kind of hitting at the same volume each time. Going through that, a little bit of K-Clip, which you can get the free version as well, K-Clip 0. which is also awesome. This is just aiming for about, I think, a decibel of clipped. Makes it so that it's just cutting off some of the top ends of the signal to reduce the dynamic range again. Then again, that transient shaper, reducing some of the sustain so the claps aren't ringing out as much. They're sounding a little tighter. A little bit of Ableton saturation to kind of fill out that sound a little bit. And then there we go. This is all very subtle stuff. The main thing, again, is the volumes and the sound selection. So let's listen to the next element that I added, which is the snare. Very similar to how, like, going with the open hat first and then adding in the hi-hat secondary to kind of beef up that open hi-hat sound and then add any groove. I usually like to do the same thing with the snares. So the idea here is that the snare is being hit at the same position, the 2 and the 4, the 2 and the 4, and usually it's kind of like the claps are left and right. So actually, let me double check something. So if we go to the claps here, there was all these different claps playing, and I think if we go to controls, yeah, so I have like 3 claps playing. One is panned to the left, one is panned to the one is panned to the right, one is panned to the left, and I had another one that is panned in the center. The idea usually is that claps are usually kind of more stereo, left and right, filling out the stereo spectrum of it. And then the snare you can add in the middle to beef up the clap a little, add a little bit more body to it, and then it's in the center kind of filling out that position there. So let's have a look at the sound. Oh, let's turn it on first. And let's solo it. Pay attention to that character, and then I'm going to add it back in. So as you can hear, it's kind of adding a little bit of more fullness to the clap. It's very subtle, but it does add a bit of something that I like to add in all my tracks. And then in terms of any processing, just removing some of the lows. In terms of like the volume for that, what I'll usually do is like bring it all the way down, bring the volume all the way down to 0 or infinity, and then slowly bring it in until I can start to hear it, and then dial it back just a little bit. It's just adding a little bit of extra to the rest. Then the next thing I like to do, like clockwork, is once like the core hits are done with the MIDI notes, so that these are all the things you've programmed in using one shots. You got like your kick, your open hat, and your clap and the snare. Then I like to add additional groove and character with top loops. So this is the top loop that I added. I'm gonna solo it. So for this, kind of going for that same kind of get that like cool stereo panning hi-hat, open hat thing that they had. I was trying to add in something a little bit more like that. Cool thing about top loops is they're usually a bit more like organic sounding. It could add a bit of like more professionalism and humanization at the same time to your drum tracks. So layering something like this, I think, is great. Again, with this, what you're kind of doing, I would do that same technique, bringing the volume all the way down and then bringing it in slowly to kind of starting to hear it affect the rest of the core loops, but you don't want it to be taking over the core loops. It's usually to emphasize them and add a bit of extra cool and vibe to it. In terms of any processing, just moving some of the lows, using an auto pan to make it have that cool left and right sound. A little bit of sidechain. The way I like to do sidechain is like this, with an Ableton shaper, going to quarter notes, and then just it's affecting this gain knob. This way, you're getting the same kind of cool ducking sound, which is useful. The sidechain compression like this is to make sure that the kick is coming out. You're moving out the element so that the kick is shining out nicely. It also adds some kind of groovy bounciness, kind of dance music vibes. And so this way you can do it with one knob instead of having to load up a compressor and route it to the kick and then adjust all the threshold and all that kind of stuff. You can get a similar clean sidechain sound with just one knob. Again, this is in the template if you want to grab the project files. And then lastly, running into this wider plugin, Polyverse Wider. And so this is just a cool stereo imaging plugin. It's free. And I've just mapped the core knobs again to an Ableton rack. It pushes things to the left or right, keeps the center free for other elements, and then adds like a nice stereo width to it. So I just dialed in a little bit of that. It's a nice way to have it blend in with the rest of the tunes. And then the last thing that I added was this little echoey kick thing that I kind of heard. So I'll just solo it because it's really subtle. Weird little sound that I heard in the reference. Add a little kind of, I guess, a very slight little character and vibe. So I just found like a weird little kick sound. Added some like lo-fi sounds with this RC20, and then removed a ton of the lows. A bit of sustain, removed some sustain to tighten up. A little bit of sidechain to make room for the actual kick. A little bit of saturation to bring it out a bit more and fill it out a bit more. And then yeah, that's a look at all that. So before we jump into the 80-20 rule, do a nice recap, or before we get into that 80-20 rule, do a recap of everything you've learned here so you can apply it to your own drums. Did want to also mention that this video is sponsored by our good friends over at Rocket Powered Sound. They hooked up in potential the kick sounds that you're hearing in here, and it's from their Ultimate Sample Pack, which is a sample pack filled with 1,000 iconic and usable sounds. Super useful if you're doing stuff like this, similar sound feature stuff. So if you want to check it out, you can get 30% off by using the code on screen now, or checking out the link on screen now or in the description. Thank you again to them for hooking us up. And with that said, let's jump into the 80-20 rule for this one.
Hi, my friend, Matt from Best Friends Club here. And if you've been paying attention, then you probably figured out what the 80-20 rule is when it comes to building out your drums. The goal here is to get 80% of the results with only 20% of the time, energy, or effort. And because the first key to the 80-20 rule for drums is to use a reference track, we're making sure that we're effortlessly hitting 80% of a very professional sounding track. In particular, we focus on nailing the pattern, sound selection, and the volume compared to the reference track so that we keep things fast and focused as we're building out our drums. The second key of the 80-20 rule here is to mix as you go in an extremely streamlined way by only focusing on the volume as well as a simple repeatable channel strip for each track that we're adding to our drums. The third and final key is to repurpose your old project files and to build up a suite of powerful templates, Ableton racks, and one knob effects that you've personalized and curated over time. If you'd like to get a head start by downloading all the racks, templates, and all the files that you've seen me use in the Ableton project file for this video, or if you'd just like to take a closer look at any of the techniques or tracks you saw me work on in this video at your own pace, you can find a link to this video's project files on screen now and at the second link that's in the YouTube description. I'm recreating a different song from the Beatport top charts every single week and making the project files available to anyone who wants them. You'll also get access to a private Discord where you can ask me and the community questions, as well as share tracks for feedback. If you or your music are not quite ready for a shot in the arm like that, I've also made you a completely free bundle of templates, samples, and special bonuses that have helped me figure out how to completely finish one new song each and every single week. And you can grab that free Ultimate Song Finishing Toolkit by visiting the first link that's in the YouTube description here. However, if you just feel like staying on YouTube for now, that's totally fine. Save that link for later and check out this playlist of videos where I remake drums from other songs from the Beatport top charts. Or if you want to take what you've learned in this video to the next level, definitely check out this video right here.